So I'd like, on behalf of all of us, to give a warm welcome to our two speakers. To my right, Marcy Kiziak, who will be speaking first on strategic workforce planning. Marcy is a very experienced human resources professional, primarily in the oil and gas and industrial construction sectors. She's been focused on HR operations and acquisitions, including integration, change management, and strategically aligning HR practices and programs. She's been most recently the Vice President of People and Safety for Magnum Energy Services, and previously was with Flint Energy. But Marcy is also the vice chair of the board of directors of our HR association, so she really brings a unique perspective. She brings the business side of experienced HR, but also the not-for-profit side. So we're very lucky to have Marcy with us. Thank you very much. Are you wired?
Good, good. I appreciate nobody mentioning how old my bio picture is either, because I very intentionally use an old one. So first of all, I'd just like to welcome everybody on behalf of the CPHR Alberta. I have a long thing to read, but I'm not going to because I mess it up every time. How many HR people do we have in the room? Do we have any? Who do we? Wow. Well, all right then, welcome. Right now, the current HR groupers is seeing something that they have likely never seen in their career in terms of the recession. Fort McMurray is a little bit different in terms of seeing the recession and a fire. I very specifically won't reference the fire a whole bunch because I don't feel like I have any authority to speak about it. So I'm not ignoring it. I just don't feel like I've got the authority to speak about it. But you guys are seeing something in the HR climate that a lot of HR people have never seen based on the severity of the recession. And a lot of businesses have cut their budgets. They've cut out anything to do with employee engagement, training development, cut a lot of headcount. And so it's been a really tough go for HR people. So I just want to say thank you on behalf of the CPHR Alberta. We are working on more and more events. And so if you've got feedback or anything that we can provide to you in Fort McMurray that's not currently being provided, I'd ask you to pop in and speak to me at the end of the day if you can. But again, we'd like to thank you for coming out and thank you for your membership. Okay, I think I hit nothing that I was supposed to in there. So today I'm going to talk about strategic workforce planning, and I'm going to do it a little bit differently. Here we go. I'm going to do it a little differently than we had originally expected this conversation, this topic to go, because what we're seeing is that businesses are facing some really different things right now. So I'd encourage you to use this time to ask questions. I will be talking about the aligning the workforce, but if you've got questions, I would encourage you to take the time to ask them as well. So as Nicole said, my slides are not working properly. Here we go. Okay. I am currently an HR consultant. My last role was a VP of HR and safety for a company called Magnum, and previous to that I was with Flint for a long time, mostly working on mergers and acquisitions on the HR side. In terms of the board stuff, Vice Chair of the CPHR Alberta, as well as on the Board of Directors for Little Warriors, which is a ranch for sexually abused children, and the Alberta Safety Codes Council. So lots of interesting stuff going on. So I'm hoping that we can just really quickly go around the room, and you can just tell me who you are, what kind of organization you represent, how the economic challenges since 2014 have affected you, and what you're hoping to get from today. So we'll just start over here. So we're going to be talking about organizational structure today, and because we have quite a varied group in the room, I'm going to try to take the approach of small business as well as how HR people, oh, right, sorry, we have a delay. I'm going to try to take an approach both from an HR perspective, and so how you can coach and get through some of the challenges right now, as well as for some people who are currently living that. So if we don't hit what everybody's hoping to get, please don't hesitate to ask the questions, because there is a fairly wide net of things that are hoping to be covered. So I'd like to hit all that. So when we talk about organizational structure, what's the first thing you think about? Just throw it out. Charts, yes. Yeah. Positions, okay. Who else? What do you think about when somebody says organizational structure?
Responsibility.
Okay, okay. Okay. So charts, it's all kinds of things we talk about. We talk about matrix organizations sometimes, volunteer organizations, what reporting might look like. functional structures, position descriptions. At the end of the day, it means a lot of things, and it means different things to different people, okay? So at its absolute most basic level, when we talk about organizational structure, this is what we should be thinking about. And I respect there's lots of opinions as to whether or not cavemen actually existed. We'll have that conversation later. But at its most basic level, it was a very linear, it's very linear, right? And so if you look at the cavemen, tasks are very sequential, right? And so clearly defined and highly dependent, and one task must be completed before another one starts, right? You hunt the hunter, the gatherer, the tanner, all those sorts of things. Now, when we talk about organizational structure, especially from an HR perspective, we hear things like cross-training and job descriptions and competency development profiles, which are a whole other topic, concurrent priorities, performance reviews, succession planning, all sorts of things, goal setting, right? And so we see these things in organizations, and I'm going to assume some of the larger organizations has all these things in place. Yeah. Smaller ones, less so. So do any of your organizations not have performance reviews in place right now? Okay. What about competency development profiles? Is that the first time anybody's hearing that today? Okay, good, wonderful. But lots of businesses don't have any structure at all. And there's a couple of reasons for that. So lots of them don't have any structure or any actually defined structure because A, they don't know what it needs, right? And so in some cases, organizations just know they need something different but don't know what it is. Lots of times they can't afford to bring in somebody to help them. Sometimes they've read a book or done some research and then tried to apply it and it hasn't worked. Sometimes they just don't know how to get there. And so they know what they want to look like, they know what sort of tools the organization wants to have, but they just aren't sure how to get there and how to execute on it. And sometimes organizations make a choice to have no structure. Lots of times this happens if employees are trying or employers are trying to avoid bureaucracy, or if they want things to have a very family feel. Sometimes they will avoid structure completely. I don't necessarily recommend this path. I know some businesses where it works very effectively, and I would say at the very least, if you work for an organization that has made a decision to limit their structure, that you set expectations for people at an absolute minimum. Expectations are really everything. When employees don't know what's expected of them, very little gets done. I think my HR friends will agree on that. So just very quickly as a table, and it sounds like most of you know each other, very quickly, if you can just jot down 3 to 5 regular tasks that you perform every single day or regularly that are not value add or don't move the organization forward. Yes, I can give an example of that. It sort of depends on the particular function, right? And so it could be, spoiler alert, it could be something that you're doing that really is not part of your job, something that you've picked up because somebody else has just been dropped. Anything that just, you can't figure out why you do it. You aren't even sure why you do it, but it has to be done. So anything that really just isn't value add. I'd say anything that under your breath you say, good God, why am I doing this? This is not my job. This is not what I was hired to do. Okay, and then just at your tables, just for a couple of minutes, I want you to discuss the following things. When did these things become your priority? So were they always your priority, or did they become your priority at a certain point in time? Did you lose staff? Is there a theme to the task? And are they all necessary tasks? Just 5 minutes. All right. Ready to go? Do you guys need 4 minutes? Or you guys? Okay, good. Any volunteers? Any volunteers? Oh, hang on, we got the mic coming. I need a couple.
So from a Fuse social point of view, we don't have a communications person in house. We have a contract. So then, for all our programs and initiatives, it then falls to each other or to our own selves to figure out and muddle through our communications and marketing strategy. We use that term very loosely because there really isn't one, and sort of cobble together where, gosh, it would be nice to have. We also sometimes are the janitor.
Okay.
I had to go around and wipe all the door jambs because we had fingerprints everywhere and it didn't look good for our visitors.
Fair enough, all right. You're the first person who's ever said that when I've done this, but I'll take it.
Well, we do have a cleaner, but
Yep.
the cleaners come like once a week or so.
Okay, who else?
Somebody else at the table.
Oh, we've got one over there. We'll give them a minute to think about it.
Actually, three of us had a common issue is the re-reporting multiple times for multiple users. So the information is the same, but the way they want it delivered is different for each leader.
Oh, wow. And that was in different organizations? Oh, wow. Wow, okay. All right. Who else?
Yeah, so that was the biggest one. And then renaming positions or realigning positions because you might not be rehiring for that position, so you're basically taking some of those job responsibilities out of one person who has left and put them into a new position. So that actually affects not just one person because you're not hiring one person to replace them, but it could affect 5 other job descriptions that you have to redo.
Yep, okay. Who else? Anybody else at this table? Anything else? So what we often see when we do this exercise is that the things that you've written down are generally, and the things that you communicate back to us are the things that somebody else could very easily do much more easily. That's different. The different reporting for different users, that's a different issue. And because you guys come from such large organizations, I'm going to be counting on you guys for some different feedback today, because normally we don't get large organizations in these sessions, so that's going to be interesting. But normally what we do find out is that all the tasks that people are doing are tasks that they don't want to do or they're not value add, are actually also tasks they're not very good at. So we find that a lot. And they don't like to do it also because they're not very good at it. So we certainly hear that a lot. Have you, is that at smaller businesses and working for smaller businesses and even large businesses, we hear a lot getting the right people on the bus, right? But you hear that a lot? The right people on the bus, right people in the right seats on the bus, right? What we're seeing now, post-recession, so it's a good question because in August 2017, ATB said the recession was over, right? So does everybody believe that? No? It doesn't feel like it's over, right? And this is a completely different environment anyway, so likely doesn't feel like it's over here. But what we keep hearing is people saying we need to get the right people on the bus, right? Which is something we often hear, which isn't so easy and is often very frustrating for people because the bus, often the person in it, is doing the maintenance on the bus, which the engine is in the back, is doing the maintenance on the bus, is putting gas in the bus, and lots of times with smaller business, people who own those small businesses are trying to find alternate sources of income to be able to put gas in their bus, right? And they're driving the bus and then filling all of these different positions. So we keep saying we need to have the right people in the right seats on the bus, but there aren't enough people or aren't enough resources to fill the seats on the bus, right? The reality is that it actually feels like this for most of you. Yeah, does anybody else feel like this? A lot of the time? Yeah. Yes?
Marcy, just wanted to relay a comment from Volunteer Alberta, going back to the realignment of job descriptions, saying that absolutely it is critical for not-for-profits or social profits.
For realignment of job descriptions?
Yeah.
Do most of you have job descriptions in your organizations? Is what you do actually what your job description says? No. Does your job description have like 4 things on it and the rest of it is as required? Yeah. Which is generally what we do see, so yes. Yep, agreed.
Okay.
It's not really an HR trick. No. It's not an HR trick, it's a management trick because when we're trying to build out these lovely job descriptions and then the managers say, but I want them to still be able to do whatever it is we need them to do. Well, okay.
It's never coming from HR, it's coming from the hiring manager.
Yeah. There's a misconception that position descriptions create a box, right? And then people won't do anything that's not on their job description, which is why I always say instead of descriptions, we really need to talk about expectations. Because I think it's just I think it's a more realistic way to talk about job descriptions is as expectations, right? So what does the organization culturally expect of you? If you have an organization that is all hands on deck and you could be expected to be wiping door jams the same day as you're posting social media content, then that's the expectation in the culture of the organization, right? So it's not that likely that you find people a whole bunch of the time in I don't want to say non-unionized environment, but in normal environment who very openly say it's not my job. Lots of times they don't last very long anymore because right now everything is everybody's job, right? Which is how we ended up like this, right? Yeah? She needs a microphone.
I'll bring you the microphone. No, but it's important.
They would have made you restate the question. It would have been awkward.
You spoke about the right people on the bus, and you just alluded to unionized environments.
Oh, I didn't mean to.
That's okay, but I think the right people on the bus, whether it's unionized or non-unionized, is very important. But when you are going through hard economic times and you do have unionized people and there are cuts, unfortunately, seniority plays a role, and then it becomes a whole new dynamics because you're dealing with a lot more than just cutbacks. You're dealing with, do you have the right people, and then those people are impacted. So it brings a whole new layer to trying to get the work done.
Yeah, and are you able to make those choices, right? Like sometimes you can't. And
You can't.
Nope.
And it's a very long process.
Yes, it is. Yeah. We did this once this morning, and that was the feedback actually that we got, is to remember how unionized Fort McMurray is, because often our participants don't come from unionized sector. So, but yes, it's a very different situation in that case. Thank you. Back to our bird. So, does anybody feel like this today? No? Yes? Yeah. Yeah. Show of hands? Yeah. The first low hands? Got it. So the reality really for a lot of organizations, and again, I'm really encouraging the two of you, Suncor and Syncrude, to speak up if this is different, because it's important that we have that balance. But organizations right now, especially your non-for-profit or your social profit, the small business and volunteer organizations, what happens is they've got such limited funds that they can only hire very few people at a time. And so what happens is that you have one person who does everything, right? And that person becomes full, like absolutely bursting at the seams full. And so finally a second person is approved by your board or approved by your association or approved by management. And then a second person comes in and they pick up all of the things that are getting dropped until they're full. Right? And then we go through this cycle over and over again. But what often doesn't happen is nobody takes the time, not nobody, but what often happens is we don't take the time to think about who really should own what tasks, right? And so people own the tasks because they're the ones that they're catching. So instead of taking the time to actually work through what are the value add tasks of this organization, you're just picking up the things that need to get dropped and plugging the holes regardless of who's best to do that task, right? Does that make sense? Does anybody have anything different happening in their organization? Yeah. Yep. Yeah, you're not uncommon at all. Because in smaller organizations, you don't necessarily have the luxury of being able to enter the time to do a task analysis, right? And lots of times you hang on to people who you might not otherwise hang on to because you're afraid if you lose the body, you lose the role, right? So you just try to be very careful to try to just make it work. So that's what happens. So what we're missing here is that we are often not doing that task analysis. And task analysis doesn't need to be a really complicated process. I'm going to show you a fairly simplified way to do it today that might be helpful for you. But it's really what we're missing is we aren't taking the time to figure out what the core competencies of those actual roles are and setting the expectations. Does anybody have any feedback on that or any situations that they've seen? Stories they want to tell? Anybody? Yes. You can take, no, please.
I noticed you have volunteers up there. And I know in the social profit, volunteers are very important. But again, coming back to when you don't have enough time, it's hard to recruit them. And I'm currently looking for work over the last month and looking in the social profit. And not one organization asked me if I would volunteer while I was looking. Not one. And so I found that quite interesting, that I know that lots of times they're looking. So I think that sometimes comes back to the resources. that people are so busy that they don't have time sometimes to organize that.
That is it. That's really.
No, should be.
I'll take my sweaty one back.
Okay.
I like your attitude. And that's exactly right, right? It's the time. It's finding the time to be able to coordinate volunteers is a really time-consuming thing. I do work for a not-for-profit called HEART. It's the Humane Animal Rescue Team. And even for them to try to find the time to put some of the events together is just absolutely impossible. Absolutely impossible. So very good point. So adding the resources will often solve the problem in the very short term, but the problems will continue because then, like we saw earlier in this presentation, is that people are then doing the things that they are not necessarily the best at, right? So you could have somebody inside your organization who is much better at any of these tasks, right? But you just don't have the time to flip them or don't have the time to move the tasks around, which is a really frequent problem. And so, and again, it's about really figuring out what those tasks we're hired to do. So you don't ever hire anybody simply with the job description that your job is to come pick up the stuff I'm dropping, right? Like nobody posts that, nobody says that. They put stuff together, but then sometimes it just doesn't resonate. And there really are constraints to making this fix, right? So time and money are a huge constraint. Most organizations just don't have, right now especially, just do not have the time and the money to be able to add another role, right? You have to justify the role. You have to be able to post the role. You have to get your board on board. You have to get management on board, right? And attrition. So if you go through the process and you have your number one, you hire number two, you get approval for number three, and then number two quits because they're burnt out, you're right back in the same situation, right? And control, especially we see this a lot when it comes to social profits. Like I've learned to say that, social profits. You don't hear that anywhere else, but people are very committed to their cause and they're very committed to their organization. So sometimes it's really hard to give up some of those tasks, especially if they're critical to the success of the organization, right? So really hard to give up some of those things. And time to trust new resources, which is exactly the same thing, right? It takes time to trust somebody that they're going to do the job as well as you want them to or as well as you feel so you do, right? And so some things to consider is what resources do you actually have inside your organization? The 4 years that I was with Magnum, one of those years I ran one of our coding shops in Nisku. And I was 6 months in, and one of our challenges was we didn't have proper operating procedures, okay? So stay with me. We didn't have proper SOPs. And I found out 6 months in that one of my guys on the shop floor had an MBA. He had an MBA from Mexico, right? Perfectly valid, it was a great MBA, genius guy, but I didn't know that. We never had that conversation. We never went through that exercise of really learning who the people are, right? So something that was a huge problem for me, I had my solution on my shop floor. So figuring out who we have for resources and really having those conversations and figuring out what people want to do, right? So what they're capable of, what they want to do. A resume often won't tell you that. It just won't. So really good conversations with your people. And the people that you have in your organization, are they the right people? And this is hard because we go back to if you eliminate somebody in your organization, will you be able to replace them, right? And so lots of times people aren't confident that they will actually be able to replace that role. They fear that it'll go away, so people just stick with the devil that they know. Again, do we know what they're capable of? Just like I just said about my friend Arturo. And are the resources really committed? Are they really committed to the cause? Are they really committed to the organization? Are they committed to the values? Are they committed to moving it forward? And then here's something that's really important that we actually don't talk about enough, but do you know who your internal and external customers are? Because that's really important when you're running a business or you're inside a business, is who are your customers, right? So my HR friends, you guys will know this, who's your customers? Who's your internal customers? Yeah, right? Who are your external customers?
Clients.
Yeah. And it's all your stakeholders. It's the general public. It's anybody who you might use for marketing. It's all those sorts of things. But oftentimes we don't know who they are. We don't have, it's just, has anybody ever had a conversation inside their organization where they say, who are our internal and external customers? How many of you have business plans and strategic plans? That's what I thought. Yeah. Strat plans are something we just don't see very much of in small business right now, especially right now, right? It feels as though it's time taking, I guess, to your point, right? do you want to take half a day away to build a strat plan? Understanding it's incredibly important to moving your business forward and setting the goals and the expectations, but people just aren't taking the time to build strategic planning, right? And so, oh, I had a typo. So if you don't know who your customers are, how do you know their expectations are being met, right? So really worth having that conversation inside your business, even if it's just, you know, in a morning huddle, whatever it is. Does everybody know who our customers are? Does everybody know what our values are, right? And organizational structure needs to align with not only the business and the services that you're in, but also those that you're aiming to serve. So I would encourage you to actually really have that conversation inside your organizations. Any questions? Okay. We're moving pretty quickly today. Okay, so I'm just going to give you this is a very simplified tool that we've used a couple of times with our groups to be able to move forward through some of these problems. And so businesses, so what kind of business is it that you have, that you're in? Domestic violence? Okay. Okay, and your admin and your finance? Okay. Okay. So lots of times when it comes to these types of businesses, because we talk about the bird, I just see this look on your face. Like, oh, I'm the bird. Yeah. So we were trying to solve the problem of organizational structure. The first thing that we need to do, and the bird, if we go back to the visualization of the bird, is admitting that there is actually a problem inside your organization. Because lots of times people don't want to admit that there's a problem. Like this is not a car accident. Like you say, admit there's a problem and say you're sorry if you're the person who is running that organization, or acknowledge that there is a problem, because lots of times we just don't seem to want to acknowledge that there's an issue. So we need to admit that we've got problems inside of our organizations when you've got people who are burning out, you're starting to see people who are quitting, and you've got people who are not performing at their highest level. It's because they're tired. And that's okay, but we should talk about it. We really should. And so the first step to fixing it is tracking the actual hours worked. So how many people in here actually track the hours that they work? 2? You're a consultant, Ada. So we've got 2 people who actually track the hours that they work. You did 2? Every employee tracks their hours? Yeah, we often see organizations not tracking hours because, especially not-for-profits, because people feel as though those extra hours are really donated back to the cause or back to the association. So we often see them not being tracked. This is a higher percentage of people who track their hours than we normally see, which is good. Yeah.
And sometimes, often in social profits, those are people who are like community builders and community development people who that's their passion, that's the way they live though. So some.
Oh, hang on, we're gonna grab you a mic. Hang on. I don't want to miss that.
What did I just say? Oh, in the social profit sector, often you get people attracted to that sector because that's what they love and that's what they are passionate about. And so they're community builders, community developers, and then they tend to live that. So it's not intentional. It's a very difficult to cut it off at 4:30.
Yeah.
Because for me, I could track probably 24 hours because I'm always thinking about, because it's built into me. That's what I love to do, and I'm lucky that is what I can do for work. So I think often we are, well, gosh, if I tracked all those hours, like there's no way I'm going to get that back. And it's not that we do it to track the hours, but we are really doing our organizations a disservice by not recognizing all of those hours.
Can anybody tell me why we're doing our organizations a disservice when we don't track the hours? Anybody?
Because then your true value is not represented.
Yep.
And the true amount of work is not accurate.
Yep. That's exactly it. It's really difficult to justify that you need to add additional resources when you don't track your hours. It's really difficult to justify how much actual work people are doing when you're not tracking them. Oh, yeah.
We got a question from online here. What does Marcy think is the mindset or the atmosphere of not talking about overworked or burnt out staff?
Say that again?
What does Marcy think is the mindset or the atmosphere about not talking about overworked or burnt out staff?
Oh, this is an entirely different talk. I have a particular passion for mental illness and mental awareness in the workplace. I think it is something that we do not talk about enough. I think that oftentimes burnout or any sort of mental illness I think we often confuse performance gaps that are actually should be acknowledged as not performance gaps. And so that could be burnout, it could be somebody suffering from a mental illness of some sort, it could be anxiety, depression, any of these sorts of things. So I think not talking about it just creates a cloud over it. I think it's important that we talk about it and we talk about it as a team because you talk about your tribe, right? And sometimes the people you work with become your tribe. Sometimes you spend as much time with them as you do with just about anybody else. And so I think it's really important that you have those really honest conversations. And so I think it can be dangerous to not have those conversations, and I think it can be dangerous to not have those conversations with each other. And I think that management needs to acknowledge that it is a real problem. It is an absolute real problem. And there were some new stats that came out that long ago. I meant to bring them with me, but it was about employee assistance programs. So there is an increase in organizations that are offering them and a decrease in people that are using them. Isn't that crazy? Right? It's crazy. So I think it does a disservice to your entire organization by not talking about it. Is that something you guys talk about in your teams? Yeah. This organization is really good with openly discussing it. Burnout's tough. Burnout is really, really tough on people, and it affects you personally, physically, mentally, at home. It gets really, really hard.
I think personally, just from my experience doing HR issues, people come to you, right? So it's not only your own burnt out, it's the burnout of everybody else, what you're dealing with too, right? So
yeah.
It's good to be, and it's nice to be acknowledged for what you do, how hard it really is.
You're absolutely right. And I am going to defer to you two on this one a little bit too, but I spend a lot of time talking to students, and one of the things I tell new HR students is that for the first couple of years, it's going to be really interesting. It's going to feel like you're being paid to gossip for a living. But then it's going to get heavy, and you're going to know stuff you don't want to know. You're going to know stuff about people you didn't want to know, and you're going to take it home, right? And in HR, you can see some pretty gross stuff, really awful shit, stuff people do to each other. You can just see some pretty gross stuff, and you carry it with you, right? And the social profit is very much like that too, right? I do work with Little Warriors, which is like I said, sexually abused children. You can't, there is no switch. You can't just turn that stuff off, right? So it's tough. What do you guys think?
Well, we both commented that we might say talk about workload with our peers. I would never, say something to my leader unless it got maybe, I don't know, out of hand, because you do it and you get the work done, or else I guess it's a reflection on your capability, because we're not getting more workforce resources. Yeah. Our numbers are set, and the work has to get done. Yeah. So you do it. So it's more of maybe I'll talk about it with my peers and complain and vent and then get back to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, by the same token, tracking hours, they said there's really no point of tracking hours because she said, we have workforce plan, this is the workforce plan, and unless something happens and it's exceptional, they can approve extra headcount, but mostly it's almost set in stone. And the other piece is we're all salaried, so you can put in whatever hours you want, you work from home, you work on your work phone, so tracking your hours doesn't mean anything. Not that it's bad.
I'm very happy. I don't that sounds a very negative comment.
No.
All the time, there's ebbs and flows.
Yeah, and for lots of organizations, there are. There absolutely are. Yeah. And it does, it is a little bit different. It does become a little different for social profit to big organizations. There definitely are some differences. There are fewer people to spread out some of the ugly stuff on, especially some stuff that you guys might see. there definitely are fewer people to spread that out on, and fewer tools as well, right? Which is the real difference in terms of tools.
I've got a question, actually, to you both. Is it because of the funding models? Because the way that in the social profit, then funding prescribes exactly how many people can be allocated to whatever programs are being distributed?
Well, our workforce numbers are set by our budget, and it's approved because Syncrude is a joint venture, so it's approved by our owners. So if we want to increase or whatever with workforce numbers, we need approval for it. So it's not, yeah.
Yeah, and it's the same here. It's at senior level. It's set that this is the goals for the company. In order to achieve those goals, this is the budget we have, and translates into number of positions.
It is.
Very different
Yeah.
model.
No, it is. It is. I can tell you from 8 years at Flint, it's very different, and there is no emotion attached to adding people. It's all numbers, right? And some of the other organizations, at least you can. There's a bit of an emotional aspect to it, where you can add numbers simply based on, some of the work is quite ugly, so you can sort of spread that around a little bit. When it comes to organizations like Syncrude and Suncor, there is no emotion attached to it. It is numbers.
Sometimes when there's emotions too, it's very challenging.
Yep.
Sometimes when it's emotions involved as well, it's very challenging because, if the money's not there and you still want to keep the people,
Yeah.
You have to make those hard decisions, right?
Yep. Yep. You're right. I don't want to lose sight of your point though, because, and again, this is something I talk to newer HR people quite a bit, but it still lands just as well here, is it is perfectly okay as somebody who does end up having to handle a lot of the HR type stuff to set boundaries for yourself. Because sometimes HR people don't do that. They just don't set the boundaries, and then they end up carrying the weight of things that are tough to carry, right? Or sometimes don't say, somebody comes to you and they're distraught and they want to talk to you about something, and it's difficult to stop them and say, I'm not the right person for you to talk to. You need an actual counselor, right? It can be really, really hard to do that. I don't know if you guys see that as well, but it's really hard to do that. Sometimes people confuse HR as counselors, and we are not trained counselors, and we should not ever forget that. Yeah. Yes, that's true.
So if I need counseling,
Yeah.
I just go to their office, right?
Yep.
So
That's absolutely true. Absolutely true.
we go full circle.
Yeah, absolutely true. So like I said, acknowledge that there's a problem and talk about it with your teams, that there is a problem. And then the next thing I would suggest that you do is a task analysis. And so I've given a very simplified version of how to do this. So what we often do when we're trying to do a large one or a CDP or something is we have somebody track everything that they do for every minute of a day for an extended period of time. It's usually a week. I would suggest you guys don't have the luxury of a week to be able to do that. So I would just suggest that you pick a couple of days. It also makes good sense to have your whole team do it at the same time. Because what you're able to do and your whole team does it is to be able to determine things that are redundancy. And so as a very simplified example, if 3 of you go for the mail on a day, then 3 of you have gone for the mail. Not realizing that 2 of you have already gone for the mail. Like the 2, you know what I mean? Yeah, yeah. And I say it, like it's such an oversimplified thing, but it's totally true. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. By the time you're done, everybody's gone for the mail. So I suggest that you do a task analysis over a certain period of time. And I say here that you do with no judgment. And the reason I say that is because oftentimes there's things that people don't want to admit they do. There's a few reasons for that. One of them is because they're covering for somebody else, right? They're doing somebody else's job and don't really want anybody to know it. Happens all the time. I had one situation in one group that I did where they didn't want to tell me that we had one person who was picking up the boss's dry cleaning. And they didn't want to tell me that. Well, we kind of need to know that because now you got a gap in your day, right? Seriously, who's picking up who's dry cleaning anymore, right? But that was what was happening, is just picking up dry cleaning. And so it's really important that you do it without any judgment, the things that you actually do in the course of a day. So I am a sticky note junkie, like literally all over my house. And so, yes, right? I can make a list on my phone and it will still be there 6 months later. Yeah? I can't do it on my phone. I just can't. I'm not responsible enough for that. I need sticky notes. But I am a sticky note junkie. And so what I do is I put them on sticky notes. But when I do with a team, what we do is then you go through and then you theme out the actions, right? And so you figure out what's administrative, what's finance, what's fund generation. So any of those sorts of things that you do with your team. And that's how you figure out where your redundancies are. It's also how you figure out that where you are really doing things that you are not good at. And if you've got somebody inside your organization who is much better at it. So, but then you really get to think about the tasks that need to get done, and then you have the opportunity to say, okay, well, maybe I'd like to do that, right? And then plan for change management. Does anybody in here have any change management background? A little bit? Okay. So there's some really good models out there. That's why I mentioned it. There's a really good one I like to use called ADKAR. It's ADKAR, and it's change management. It just takes you through a series of steps to be able to manage change with people. So it's one that I really like to use, but it allows you to be able to take people through an awareness process and make them want to make the change. Has anybody here ever been through a DISC? Yeah. You just did yours, Scott, like an hour ago. So what DISC does is it's like Myers-Briggs or any of those other tests. So anybody who's done it, do we have any S's in the room? Never have any high S's in the room. But with the high S, it stands for steady. And so it's not that they don't like change, it's that change needs to be communicated in a very specific way. So when you do change people's roles and start to figure out who should be doing what, it's really important that you have those proper communication levels. And this, I hear you that you do not, in many cases, have the funding to add more people, and there's still too much stuff to do. So I don't want to suggest that this is a magic tool that's going to stop that for you, and I'm a genius. What I'm saying is this might give you an opportunity to build a little space in your day, okay? And so then to normalize, because organizational structure is really, really quick to become disjointed, but really difficult to fix once it's entrenched. So we're just going to do a really quick, so we can do a really quick exercise, or I've got 15 minutes to answer questions if anybody has questions instead. Questions are more fun, but okay. Does anybody have is there any questions over, Chris, is there questions back there?
Nope.
Nope. Any questions about this from the group? Does anybody see it as being applicable or something that they might be able to use? Or pieces of it? Yeah? Okay. So let's just do, just real quick. I gotta find my notes. So just real quick, write down in as best as you can on an average day, a regular day, what your day looks like. Series of tasks.
Your work day.
Yes, your work day. Oh, no, this morning I had somebody write down something I didn't want to know. So, seriously, he really did. So, what your work day looks like.
Marcy, while everybody's working on their homework there, question from online here. Can you tell us how organizations can access a DISC assessment for their staff?
Yep, they sure can. You can contact me after. I can access them for them. There's lots of people who teach DISC if they want somebody to come in and actually teach DISC to them. If they're just looking for DISC links, my information will be up at the end and they can reach me and I can get them for them. Is everybody all done already? That was really fast. Okay. Wow. Okay, so I want you to look at your list and I want you to cross out anything that one day just fell into your job description and you have no idea how the hell it got there. Cross them, all of them out. Okay, I want you to cross out anything that is likely being done by more than one person. That's a redundant task. So your mail issue.
The dry cleaning issue.
The dry cleaning issue. Don't do that. Okay, cross out anything in your job description that is really not value add, that is not helping move anything forward. Okay. So take a minute, look at your list. How many of you still have at least 75% of your tasks written down, not crossed off? Okay. How many of you still have at least 50%? 25%? You guys are doing better than most groups. Do most groups end up with about 25% of their tasks still there? Most of you guys are doing much better than most of them. I strongly suggest that you run the exercise or something like this inside your organization, especially your smaller organizations. If nothing else, it just gives people an awareness of what the other people in their team are doing and what possibly can be shifted in terms of your organizational structure. Just give people a bit of a break, but just so people are aware of what everybody else is doing and make sure that the value add tasks are being done and not 3 people are going for the mail. Okay. Any questions? Concerns? Anything anybody wants to talk about?
It's time for free advice. Come on, why would you pay for it? Might as well get your questions answered for free, right? Might as well ask now.
Okay, all right. So that's it for,
Oh, finally a question.
Sorry, I saved the bell.
okay.
The first step here, when it's like admit that there's.
Yeah.
The first step to this, admit that you have a problem. At what level can this come from? Is this somebody who's representing your HR that has to admit that there's a problem? Is it the staff that come forward and say, hey, something's not working well here? Is it supposed to be the manager? Like, at what point and to whom is it to say we have a problem?
Yeah, it really depends on the size of the organization, and again, most small businesses that we see, we end up with a lot of owners or a lot of not-for-profits, a lot of EDs, that sort of thing, and it's okay. At that level, I think it's okay to have that conversation. I know it's more difficult at the large-scale business, but with the smaller businesses or the social profits, I think it's okay at your ED level or at with your staff to have that conversation that you acknowledge that there's something wrong, right? Because at least if you're acknowledging that there's an issue, and even if you can't fix it, acknowledgement means a lot to people, right? It really does. So smaller businesses, again, and I'm trying to temper the comment because I completely understand that with one of the larger organizations, it's much more challenging to do something like that. But with the smaller ones, I think it is okay for the ED or for you as management to talk to your team and acknowledge that you are aware that there is something wrong, even if you cannot fix it, but at least acknowledge that you're aware. It's just, to me, it feels like a much more honest approach to things, and people appreciate the honesty.
That's what I would say. You have to have the right people
Yeah.
at the table talking about it. Having the right people at the table talking about it versus just, I don't want to say the word complaining, but complaining about it versus having a strategic talk about it with the right people.
Yeah, there's a huge amount of value in acknowledging and moving forward, right? And then, then a lot of conversations aren't happening, in the parking lot that should be happening as a team. Yes?
Of these 6 things that I wrote down,
Yeah.
one thing that concerns me is.
Wait, start with number 1. Hold on. There you go.
One of them is review process with staff, and I put 5 minutes. Right? I should be spending way more time than that, but I'm not. I don't have time.
Yeah. So how many things did you cross off your list?
One.
Just one?
Just one. Yeah, well, I'm new. I'm brand new. So
Oh, okay.
I'm researching and looking right now, but I
Yeah.
don't hope to be doing that for very long.
Yeah, 5 minutes is probably not enough time to be
At
having.
least, yep, good old 5 minutes.
Well, because what does that lead back to? It leads back to the expectations that we talked about, right?
But they could be doing some of the stuff that I'm doing because
Sure can.
it was in the wrong position to start with.
Yep.
You got to be utilizing your staff, right? But you got to be utilizing their abilities as well.
Are they your staff?
Yeah.
Do a task analysis. Because then you'll be able to see what it is that you can then delegate to them, and they can see what it is that you're doing, right?
Exactly.
Different for you because you're brand new, but at least then you can see what they're doing.
I have a question from volunteer operator.
What are the repercussions as staff of saying your organization has a problem or you have a problem?
What kind of problem?
What kind of problem? Any problem.
Well, that's a leadership issue.
If we're talking in the around the alignment of tasks and staffing, what kind of repercussions if I, as a staff member, say, hey, we're not resourced properly, we've got a problem? What have you seen in your experience?
Go ahead, Chris.
So probably a little bit around the idea of, especially in low economic times where we've got a lot of downturns where there's issues like this, it's about that person saying, there's something wrong with the job. The job isn't aligned. I'm doing too much work. I think to this person's point, they're saying, what happens if I come up and tell people, hey, there's something wrong with these jobs, blah, blah, blah. Am I in a position where I'm going to be the one let go, where I'm going to be in a position of being told, well, you're just not doing the job well enough. You should go. We'll hire somebody else to do it.
That speaks to a leadership issue, right? And having some issues around leadership and around having an honest environment. Certainly know your environments, right? emotional intelligence is an important thing. Know your environment and know if it's safe. But, you know, and I'll speak specifically to leaders and people who are leading committees and leading boards and leading teams, that it should be okay for you to create a safe space for your people to have that conversation with you, because your ability to retain them, retention, will be around that. If you put people in a position where they do not feel comfortable having those conversations with you, you're going to have a retention issue, which is an entirely different issue. It's about creating a safe environment. Way easier said than done. Super easy for me to say up here.
I just had one comment is like, as an HR person, and I guess anybody in that capacity, what we can do to help the organization is sometimes leaders would come to us and say, hey, you know what, so-and-so is not performing. Put him on a performance improvement plan, or let's get him out of here. So the first thing would be like, okay, so let's look at how he got there, and you know, why is he or she not performing? So is it maybe overload of tasks? Is it maybe through all of the reorgs that employee ended up in a position where they don't have the capability or the knowledge to perform? So that's one thing that we can do, is like the task analysis, like, first of all, is that employee a fit for that job? And second of all, is there too much of expectation on that employee for them to perform at that level of expectation?
I couldn't have said that any better myself, honestly. Like, that is exactly it. Have the expectations been set for that person? Do they understand their job, and are they able to do it? And then on top of all that, are there any potential mental issues we should be aware of? Right? HRing ain't easy. But you know, are there any, so those things all need to be thought about when you're having struggles with people's performance, for sure. So thank you for that. Anything else? Okay, well, I'm here the whole rest of the afternoon. If you've got any questions or concerns, certainly talk to me. My information will be up momentarily. It's also on your stick. If you have any questions or concerns at all, don't hesitate to reach out to me there. As well as from a CPHR Alberta perspective. By all means, if you've got questions or concerns or have ideas for things that we can bring to Fort Mac, please talk to me. We're happy to do it. We just would like to understand the needs. Yeah, that's my time.